The main thing that I really wanted to ask was the film felt like it was packed with a lot of subtext. There was a lot of things left unsaid, a lot of really intense gazes, and for me, and I'm sure a lot of other viewers, it left us with a sense of either worry or suspense or wonder. And coming out of the film, I started to realize that a lot of these concerns or feelings of tension were stemming from, I suppose, just inherent stereotypes. So what I'm curious and what I wanted to ask you was, did you intentionally utilize stereotypes as a means of directing the flow of tension in the film?
I think we're playing with stereotypes in a certain way. You know, there's some of these characters that you see them and you assume they're going to do one thing. I think they behave a different way. But I want to take one step back, though. I think the world I grew up in, people don't, or I'll say men don't sort of express themselves, you know, in a very overt way, you know. There's a lot of things communicated with looks, you know, and sort of like with stares, to be honest, you know, or looking away, not making eye contact. I think it was very important for me with this character that, you know, just this guy, a Chiron, little / black, that was the way he performed out in the world. And he's sort of retreating into himself over the course of the film. So with that particular character, I don't think it's a stereotype that he's not vocal. It's just a reflection of the men I grew up with in this world in Miami. Because I don't know if you were at the Q&A, but when Terrell speaks, he speaks, but he doesn't speak very often, you know? And I think in the play, the character Little / Chiron was sort of the same way. He was like a passive observer in his world. As far as the stereotypes, we really wanted to present characters that, again, like with the character Juan that Mahershala Ali plays, where, oh, here's this drug dealer, and we open the film where he's very, very menacing, and then the very next thing he's doing is caring for this kid. So it was sort of like a thing. It wasn't meant to be clever, but we did want to play with expectations.
Do you feel that pop culture has a gay agenda?
No, I do not feel like pop culture has a gay agenda. I mean, if it did, I mean, there would be gay characters everywhere, you know, because I feel like I know gay people in all walks of my life, you know. But I don't see them represented in arts and letters as much as I feel them, like in my actual social sphere. So no, I don't think there's a pop cultural gay agenda. I do think certain images, because of the lack of them, that when we see them, they feel overrepresented, you know, which to me, I don't think that's a bad thing at all, you know, because I think we should be looking at people, you know, who we consider to be voiceless, you know, and I think this movie is giving a voice to, just from the neighborhood that I'm from, the neighborhood Terrell's from, characters that typically are voiceless, you know? And it doesn't help that the character Chiron, literally, because of the world, is making himself more and more voiceless. You know, he's playing into the perception. But I think in that way, the movie's sort of, again, toying with a few different things, but hopefully presenting them in the way that people can get, you know what we're trying to do with the character.
That's wonderful. One more thing I wanted to ask you as well. So the timing of this movie is pretty interesting for us here in Toronto. I'm sure you know you've been following the news here and there, and Black Lives Matter, the group and the movement, have been making a lot of headlines in the city over the last year, and they seem to have a very interesting relationship with the gay community, especially the organizers of Pride, where you can almost say that as much as it's turbulent, it's almost symbiotic in a sense, mostly coming from the fact that, especially for the chapter here in Toronto, the chapter is mostly organized by queer people and by trans people. Can you speak to me a little bit about homophobia in the African American community and how you feel this movie addresses that?
You know, it's interesting. So I knew that. I did a little bit of research on Toronto before coming here, and I saw that one of the leaders of Black Lives Matter here is very clearly identifies as LGBTQ, and I have no idea whether or not he's an advocate for one or an advocate for both. But I did think, like, wow, when this movie comes here, it's going to be interesting because we're sort of on the cross-section of those two things. What I go back to is, to me, the piece is purely about Terrell's experience. You know, it's not autobiographical, but it's biographical. He's a very out, gay, black playwright, you know, and so that's what the character's based on. At the same time, you know, I feel like the movie's not meant to be sort of like directly addressing, you know, all these issues. To me, it's always just about who is the character, where is he actually from. There's a scene in the film where I'm going to tell a small anecdote. There's a scene in the film in the first story where the kids are playing football. And of course, they fixate, you know, on the smallest kid, this kid Little, you know, who, of course, you know, over the course of the film becomes the most, like, LGBTQ identified character in the movie. We're shooting this scene, and where I grew up, we call that game throw up tackle, because where I grew up is a very simple place. You take a piece of paper, you throw it, you ball it up, and you throw it up, and you tackle the person with it. Now, a lot of the men on my crew were straight white men. I'm just saying that as a point of fact. And as we were playing the game, they're like, "Hey, what's that game y'all playing?" I was like, "Oh, it's throw up tackle." They're like, "Oh, where I grew up, we called it smear the queer." You know, now in my community, we never call that game smear the queer, and yet my community is the one, I'm talking about the black community, that is meant to be overtly homophobic. You know,
Yeah.
but where I grew up, we were just playing a game. Now there were some elements we would sort of pick on the weakest link, but it was never about sexuality. So I think some of these things are about perception, you know. And I think if we create more characters like this, you know, where I do think the character Teresa, the character Juan, shows a counterpoint to homophobia in the black community, I think everything's gray, you know? And I don't want this movie to push this, again, stereotype that everybody in the black community overtly hates gays, you know, outright. Because I don't think that's the case. That's not Terrell's experience, and as an ally, it's not been my experience.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.